Welcome to Dialogue of Exploration.
Today we're going to talk about the modern day entrepreneur, of which you are one. So, as I don't, even though I obviously know you very well, I don't actually know that much about what being an entrepreneur actually is. And I mean, what does the word entrepreneur actually mean?
My understanding of the word entrepreneur is one who ventures into business or businesses of their own, generally taking a financial risk to do so.
Oh, that's interesting. So taking a financial risk is what makes you an entrepreneur rather than going into business if there wasn't a financial risk?
Ah, well, that's a very good question. I think entrepreneurs are generally people like myself that decide they want to go their own way in business and are willing to take the risk to do so.
When you say go your own way, you mean is that mean it's a creative thing that hasn't been done before, or is it maybe a business you might have been in but you think that you would like to do the same thing on your own, or does it have to be something very different to be an entrepreneur? I mean,
I think all of the above. It doesn't have to be anything different. If you've come up with a great idea of your own, which is something I generally do, that's great. If you're working in an industry and you see the space for a new way of doing it and you decide to go for it, that's still entrepreneurship.
And I suppose the financial risk comes because you aren't having a wage or a salary.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's interesting. And being a modern day one, now with you, yours is internet based.
Absolutely.
So is that how you would describe what modern day entrepreneurialism is?
I think being an entrepreneur has changed because of the internet, and I think it's changed quite a lot actually. I don't need, for a lot of my businesses, premises. I don't need as many staff. I basically can host various businesses online that people use and pay to use, and that changes the whole picture of what business was about, say 20 years ago.
Because you can essentially do your business everywhere in the world. You don't need people around there, you don't need a premises. Whereas historically there was a whole setup needed.
I mean, originally, historically, you'd set up a factory and you'd have factory workers, you'd have supervisors, you'd have managers, etc., etc., etc. For my businesses and for a lot of online businesses, you don't actually need that.
That's interesting, but you would still maybe have a staff, but they could be scattered all over the world too.
Absolutely.
So everybody could be working in their own place for the same company. And that's interesting. Would there be a place though where you would meet that was a place, or could that be anywhere? Could that be a movable thing?
I do like to meet up. I still believe in face-to-face, but actually a lot of meetings I do and we do as a team of people that I work with are done online, whether it's Skype or Google Hangout.
Oh wow. So actually, even if you're abroad, you can still have a meeting?
Absolutely.
Just because of the technology?
Yes.
So how many people can meet at once? I know that I'm a little bit behind in the technical world. I maybe should know more about this. So how many of you could meet online?
Generally, the meetings I do are generally 3 people. I use Hangout a lot. I'm a bit of a Google fan, and I'm not sure what the limit is. I know we've done 4 or 5 people in one meeting, which is more than enough.
So your businesses, you have, how many businesses are there?
3, 4 at the moment, really.
So do you have an ethos that you have for your businesses that you would describe as modern day or personal to you? Do you have, what is your ethos? I think that's the word.
All the business ethos that we have, and I have, is about providing a service or services that people want to use, and we absolutely avoid using marketing scams. I mean, I use that word, but it is really because we don't want to try and persuade people to use something that they don't need. We don't want to coerce people or We don't want to, delude people, into buying a product or using a service that isn't really that useful to them.
So the ethos is that you're providing something that people want, and actually the marketing would only be to let people know it existed.
Absolutely.
And is that an ethos that you have personally had all your life, or has that been something that's evolved with your own development as a person? Or?
I think that's an ethos I've had generally all my life, but it is something that has evolved.
And would that be something that you want to be made known? Do you think it's a way that globally business should be done, or is it something that it's a personal thing that you and your team, you would call it a team, your colleagues want to do?
I think it is definitely something myself and my colleagues want to do, but I see a lot more entrepreneurs working in that way, and it's a very interesting thing, because if you look at, for example, marketing on the internet, it's got to a stage now where it's about building relationships, and so I think that changes the way people sell, not only online, right across the board. And I think big business is suffering because of this. And it's an interesting thing. If you book flights abroad now, there's all this, can you give us feedback? They're trying to build a relationship.
So it's a relationship with you and your colleagues. So ultimately then that is your relationship with your the people who buy your product or are going to be using it. So it is relational in every aspect.
Absolutely, very much so.
Interesting, isn't it? And do you think that might be going back to the old ways? Because historically, business was built very much on trust and relationship. I think I'm making that up, but that's my sense of really in the past. It had to be on a person's word, really.
Definitely, small business, I think, had to be that way. Even your local sweet shop when you were a kid. You'd go in there and they'd know your name and they'd know your mum and your dad and your brother and your sister, and there was this whole relationship thing going on, and so I think that's come back round again, and I think people feel safer buying or using services when there is that relationship in place.
And it's a relationship that's based more on truth and trust. Absolutely. Rather than trying to make someone buy something.
Very, very important. Absolutely. It has to be based on truth and trust. And as I said earlier, not wanting to sell something to somebody that they don't need.
So that's in the same way when we were exploring conscious relationship, then it's the same thing on a bigger scale, that it's about conscious business, conscious relationship in business, where you are really concerned with what you're saying, what you're doing, and it being integral.
Absolutely.
For your customers.
Absolutely.
And what do you find the responses with the people you're working with? And what happens, two questions, what happens with your customers, do you notice? But also the people you're working with and you're creating your businesses with, how has that affected your working practice?
Well, that's interesting, because actually you have to be very conscious in the relationship that you're in with the people you're working with, and that is a kind of a foundation to go out into the world from, or with.
So you are practicing what you preach and modelling it in effect.
Absolutely.
So, and is that something that you agreed when you set up your own businesses and you got together, or you made the ideas with the people you're working with? Did you at the beginning say this is how we want to work, or has that been an organic thing that happened?
Been an organic thing that's happened.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is actually, I suppose having the courage, or I don't know what the word is, having the courage really to actually say to the people that aren't on board with that they're not a part of what's going on anymore.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's had to occur.
That has had to occur, yes. And the thing is it's so important to maintain that foundation of actually relationship and that way of relating, which has got to be about transparency and trust and
being conscious,
as we've said before.
So therefore, your life and the way you live reflects in your businesses and in everything you do.
Yes.
That's interesting. And do you find that in the other businesses you work with, you said there's a change and that there is more integrity in business and more people wanting to work in this conscious, more humanitarian way. Have you found, if you work and find that that isn't occurring, what has happened with you, if that's been something you found? I don't know if you have. Have you found there's been anybody you've worked with or had dealings with that isn't that same ethos? Or has that not been a...
No, that has come up for us, especially with one of the businesses where we do deal a lot more with the corporate world. We've had a few companies that have, we've felt that what they've tried to do is grab at what we're doing, and we've had to go back in there and really try and rebuild or create a relationship as a way of that we want to work with these people. And there are people that actually don't get it and they don't want to go down that route. And what's very interesting to me is I can see in those companies that although it may be working, they're stuck. There's nowhere else for them to go apart from what they're doing and the way they're doing it and the people they're working with. And what I see, and I might be wrong here of course, but they will fall by the wayside because there are more and more smaller companies coming together, building relationships with each other that are trusting that you do that bit, we do this bit, and together, actually, we do this.
Yeah, so there is more about collaboration and cooperation rather
Absolutely.
than competition in a negative way.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you said though that the businesses were working, the ones that perhaps they're stuck, but when you say working, are you meaning in financial terms? So I'm quite interested in also about the making money bit.
Of course. Well, of course, no one's going to be completely open about how the business is doing. So we speak to these companies, or one or two companies that we've had, when I say relationship difficulties with, their way of working is very much of an old paradigm, So we don't know how well they're doing financially or how badly they're doing financially, but what we do see is that their collaboration with other businesses isn't working out, and of course eventually they will be eked out if they're not on board as part of this sort of collaboration.
Yeah, more global community.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's actually, again, mirrors your orientation of everybody being one and everybody being connected.
Absolutely.
So that your individual ethos is reflected in your business ethos.
Absolutely.
And you say that wasn't something you had as an intention when you went into business, or it just evolved because of your orientation, or was there some intention?
I think, I can't honestly say that was my initial intention. What I can say is I didn't like the way people were marketing.
Right, I understand, yeah.
And so for me that felt, when I say wrong, it did for me go against my grain, but at the same time it took me a while to actually figure out alternatives to that.
Yeah. Particularly as what you produce and the services you provide are something that is needed in the corporate world. So that's a positive thing.
Absolutely.
Then you're bringing in both a service that's needed, but also a way of working.
Absolutely.
But so what about the financial element? In this way, if you're not going to do business with people who don't mirror or reflect your way, does that mean you have to kind of not have a price at the level that you have to be,
That's a very interesting question. To not have a price, that's a very brave move, especially with the trend of the economy in business today. To not have a price. I'm not saying with people that don't have the same ethos as us, we're not going to work with you, but we are very aware that actually if someone comes along that does have the same ethos as us, and they do the same work as this company, we're going to go with the people that we can create a relationship with.
And I suppose also it's the most important thing from what I hear you saying is that you maintain your ethos.
That's the most important thing.
So financially, how much of a driver is that in terms of creating the businesses you are?
Do you know, I actually think, from my own personal point of view, I know finance is important. You know, it's the root of any business, really, isn't it?
The energy, isn't it, as well?
It is, yeah. But I still maintain that for me and for the people that I work with closely as a team, it's more about the ethos.
Yeah.
You know, and that sounds quite a brave thing to say, actually, but it really is. You know, and I know that we could have developed our businesses faster had we not stuck with those, that ethos and those sort of those principles. But I think because of the people we are, we didn't really have much choice.
Yeah, that's interesting. But as you said, the financial aspect is the root, because without the flow of that energy, that money, then there isn't a business.
Absolutely.
So how have you, as a team, worked with that? As you said at the beginning, entrepreneurialism is about doing something with financial risk. So has there been considerable risk to there's three of you particularly at the moment, isn't there?
Absolutely.
And two main
Absolutely.
people.
Yeah.
Well, more actually. There's more businesses, aren't there?
Absolutely.
So more people in the other businesses.
Absolutely.
I was thinking of one business that I know about. So there's quite a few people on. How many people in all?
Asset mapping, there's three of us. iMedia Library, there's two of us. Sounds Orange, there's two of us. Client Mailer, there's two of us. And these are all core people. If we ever need other services, we bring in contractors that provide those needs, basically.
So these businesses, how much financial risk did all of you, that's however many people that is, about 10 people, did you all have to take financial risk to do it?
Some of us had to take more financial risk than others. It's very interesting, isn't it? But I mean, effectively, yes, every one of us has had to take a financial risk.
That's interesting. Sorry, go on.
Well, I was going to say what is interesting is actually all the online platforms that we have. Probably 10 years ago, to have created these platforms the way we've done it would have cost 10 times more than it's cost us today.
Yes, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So you've taken a financial risk. So the ethos is the most important thing. So if there's been risk involved, how have you managed yourselves or worked with consciousness within a situation where you want to maintain an ethos, which means it hasn't necessarily been as fast? So there's been risk. What has that done to yourselves as individuals and also in the relationships between you all?
In the relationships between us all, it's created a lot of trust in the core people. There is this camaraderie that we are in this together, and actually we have a strong belief that what we're doing, at least is the way we're doing it, is the right way. You know, the financial risk itself is an interesting one because there are various ways of sort of measuring risk and also various ways of managing the risk. So, for example, if you've come up with an idea, actually, to tell you the truth, Dropbox is a great example of this. So Dropbox, they developed this platform and they put it out there and they put in all sorts of bids to get investment, and nobody was interested. So they decided, okay, we're going to carry on, but what we're going to do is break it down into its most basic thing. We're going to put it out there for free, and we're going to get loads of feedback from people. And what they did is they got the feedback from people, and then they developed a further stage. And then they got more feedback and developed a further stage. And before they knew it, like I say, before they knew it, it probably felt like a really long time. I know their feeling. But basically, they got to a stage where actually they didn't need investment anymore.
Right, interesting. Yeah.
And then when they did get investment, it was a huge sum of money for a lot less of their company, because the
Yeah.
idea had now been developed around what the market wanted, and that's a really, really interesting way of managing risk.
So, do you think that it takes a certain type of person who needs to take risk as part of their being, or they enjoy challenge anyway? Do you think that that somebody has that ingredient in them, so therefore they leap? Or do you think that they find that out when they're in the middle of it?
Well, it's interesting actually, because I quite like a challenge, and that was my route in.
Oh,
you know,
right, yeah.
but there
You
are
like risk.
I do like risk, you know, and there's something very in the moment actually.
Some people would say that getting together with me is a risk.
They'd be wrong. I think risk in business is always going to be there, but I think that there are other people who have such a belief in the ideas and the platforms and what we're doing, that for them that outweighs the risk.
I see.
You know, so
Because
it's very interesting.
So they can see that there's a brilliant future.
Absolutely.
So but you are a risk person, so therefore that you possibly need it for your sense of who you are, or your being, or
yeah, it's an
enjoyment
interesting
in life, or
I think there is a certain enjoyment out of it.
Yeah.
I think the real enjoyment isn't so much the risk; it's the rewards that come from taking the risks.
Yeah, I read somewhere actually in a sports psychology book that success is directly measurable to the amount of risk you're prepared to take, and that was to do with a sport and people kind of completely going for it. And I remember it resonated for me simply because I like taking risks, but that is why it resonated. I'm not sure. Do you think there's much truth in that, or?
Well, I think there is one. I think there is truth in that. I think there's a lot of truth in that. But I think it doesn't matter whether you're talking about sport or whether you're talking about business. Risks that you take have to be measured. There's no point in throwing everything on 6 red. Do you know what I mean? Because actually the chances of that coming up is, and it does, 1 in every 10 million or something.
Yeah.
But you can't guarantee that, and you can't rely on that. So I think I come back to the measuring the risk, or at least assessing the risk that's being taken.
Yeah, it's a different thing. I suppose you're more of a gambler.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the same thing happens with sport. You know, I think people that, you know, do gamble probably overtrain, and probably that's not the best way to win the race or whatever sport they're involved in.
Yes, all haven't got a healthy awareness of their ability, because even if you have a healthy awareness of your ability, you need to take risks. Because with sport, obviously that's just my world, it was particularly, you might really have the ability in your body to do a certain time, go for a certain selection race, but it's still, you have to take a risk because there's lots of other people going for it, and also you don't know till the race is run.
Absolutely.
And I suppose that's the same thing in business.
It really is. Absolutely.
It's a healthy awareness of what you're capable of, what's there, but you've got to just go for it and see.
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting because in business there's this, there's this phrase called a SWOT analysis. You know, and you're looking at your strengths and your weaknesses and your opportunities and your threats. Now, it's very interesting that people can do that for their business, but actually they don't do that for themselves.
Right.
And if you look at your own strengths and weaknesses especially, you can assess your risks that you're taking a lot clearer in business.
Interesting. So, do the group of you that are all working on these businesses together, do you think you've all got a healthy self-awareness and awareness of each other?
I think that varies to different degrees. Yeah. I really do think that varies actually. I think, what would be lovely is actually to have businesses set up in such a way that you can encourage awareness and consciousness in the people that are working together and in the employees. Because I think if that is your foundation, if that is the foundation of your business, everything that comes out from that will be an expression of that.
That's brilliant. That's probably a perfect way to end.
Fantastic.
Brilliant. That's really good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.